Spoilers for Elbaf because it's going to better illustrate what I have to say about Cobra and Vivi. So, in Elbaf, specifically from chapters 1168 to 1171, we see the consequences of King Harold, the king of Elbaf, taking up the Depths Covenant from Emu. Emu takes over his body and turns him into an immortal, and has plans for him to take the legendary Dofru of Elbaf and become an unstoppable force. However, he is killed by his youngest son, Loki. What is so interesting about this is that in chapter 1171, Emu suggests that the royal family of Elbaf could be of the D clan, and this does make some sense because the last panel that we see of Harold's face, he is smiling. So that's something to just take note of. We don't know if he's a D or not, but most likely he, Halrudan, and Loki are all a part of the D clan. So how does this compare with Vivi and Cobra? Well, like Vivi, Loki is a member of royalty, right? He is a prince and Vivi is a princess, and both their fathers are the reigning kings of their respective nations, or at least they were. And it is presumed that Cobra has been killed due to the events that happened in chapter 1085. And this is the chapter we also find out that the Nefertiti family is also of the D clan. Now, when you last see Cobra, he is not smiling. So that leads me to believe that he is not dead. What I think is going to happen is something that's going to be quite heartbreaking, because much like how Harold was taken over by Emu, I think Cobra will be taken over by Emu, but forcefully. I think in the future, we'll have this weird situation in which Cobra comes back to Alabasta and he seems completely fine. However, at this point, he has been possessed by Emu through some sort of covenant. Emu most likely has a ton of covenants at their disposal, so there probably is one for just basic mind control. I don't think it's the demon covenant that we see in Elbaf. I think it'll be something different. Don't know what it will be, but seeing as how Cobra is last seen in the presence of Emu, and Emu is there personally, anything can actually happen. So Cobra will come back to Alabasta, everything will be fine, but that is when he will give an address to the nation. He will publicly disown Vivi under the control of Emu as his daughter and disregard any right she has to the throne. This will then allow for a price to be put on her head to bring her back to Alabasta to be trialed, either dead or alive, but this is actually a ploy in order for Emu to get their hands on Vivi. Now, in her place, and this goes back to when I first started the channel, I had a theory that Rob Belushi was actually the Lost Prince of Alabasta, and I think Rob Belushi will come to the forefront and be installed as the next king of Alabasta in Cobra's place, because he actually is a blood descendant of Cobra. The reason why I keep coming back to this point is because now it has a bit more validity that this could be true based on the events of King Harold of Elbaf, because of course King Harold had two sons by two different women in his lifetime, Estrid and Ida. So now, seeing as how this plot point is established in one piece, it could be reused in multiple spots. And I think with King Cobra, it could have been used in this spot with him, in which he had a mistress perhaps at some point, which resulted in Rob Belushi. And then he had his wife, Nefertiti Titi, which resulted in Vivi. So I could see that being the case, but to continue, I think he could be a love child of some sort, or maybe he's from another line. I'm not really sure, but what I said in that video most likely still stands now. So Rob Belushi would then be the reigning king of Alabasta, taking orders from Emu directly. But during this time, I do think Rob Lucci, much like Harold, will be a king that has been given the Depths Covenant, because Rob Lucci's loyalty to the world government is something else. So I can't see why he wouldn't become a holy knight in the future, because it just seems like he is steadily upgraded throughout the narrative. First, he was a part of Cypherpole 9, then he was a part of Cypherpole 0. So the next step would be for him to be a holy knight of some sort. So I can see that being the case. So he'll be the reigning king of Alabasta and a holy knight in the stead of Cobra, who will most likely be done away with after this announcement. And then a manhunt will be conducted for Vivi. But of course, she most likely would then be a part of the Straw Hat crew at that time, making the vision of her being a pirate once held by Igaram come true, which is a nightmare for Igaram, but I think that was more of a Chekhov's gun as opposed to just a funny vision. Now, this could be a coincidence, or it could mean something very real that could happen in the future. However, in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh's beard was seen as a symbol of authority and divinity. Nefertiti D. Cobra has such a beard, most likely as a reference to this concept. Now, what's so funny about his beard is that it's a very similar shape to the beard of Rob Lucci, even more so in the post-time skip, because in the post-time skip, Lucci too grows a protruding beard like Cobra, and he has this beard when he has reached a very high status in which he is the bodyguard for people who are seen as divine in the Celestial Dragons. So I can see his status being continuously upgraded to where he is now of the highest order in the land under Emu and the Five Elders in being a holy knight, because I think it will be a grand irony for someone who is a part of a family who once denied the right to become a celestial dragon to then become a celestial dragon, because in supposedly being the son of Cobra, he too technically is a Nefertiti. So I could see that being a possibility in the future. And like we've mentioned in other videos, if he does become a holy knight, this would make sense, because this will keep him on the table as a possible threat, seeing as how he is an awakened normal zone, so there aren't many places for him to go. However, immortality would give him a decisive edge in order to fight Luffy in the future. Even though we know Conqueror's Haki can get rid of immortality, still it will be a much needed boost for someone like him. And Emu could see him as being very valuable, because he has been trained to be a weapon since his early childhood, and is still one of the most formidable users of the six powers in the One Piece world that we know. So his value is something to note of, and especially so if he is a member of the Nefertiti family. However, I would appreciate it if you entered a covenant with me and click that like button if you're liking the video, and if you really enjoy the content, hit that sub button. But also make sure to ring that bell so you never miss a Polypede Works video. On top of that, if you can find it, please click the hype button. It helps somehow. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Works.